So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on tackling stereotypes in STEM education and careers. So I think we're ready to get started now. We have 69 participants in the room, which is fantastic. A very big welcome to all of you. So, my name is Caroline Kearney, and I'm the Communications and Advocacy Manager here at European Schoolnet. And for those of you who know European Schoolnet, we are a network of 34 ministries of education across Europe, and we work on innovation in education together with our key stakeholders, including, of course, teachers like yourselves, ministries of education, industry partners, as well as researchers. So today's webinar is actually sponsored by Scientix, which is the Community for Science Education in Europe. And I'm very pleased to see a large number of Scientix teachers with us today. So you're all very welcome. The numbers are increasing as I speak. And of course, it's jointly organised with STEM Alliance, which is European Schoolnet's joint platform for education and industry. And here we really bring STEM stakeholders together to promote STEM studies and careers. And within the STEM Alliance, we're involved in a series of important initiatives, such as the Professionals Go Back to School scheme, where professionals actually go into the classroom to inspire young people to pursue STEM studies and careers, as well as other schemes such as the Teacher Placement Scheme, where teachers have the opportunity to go and visit industry and to really get insights into what's happening in the real world of STEM. So let's look a little bit at the structure of today's webinar. We've got some exciting speakers for you. We will start with a few words about our campaign. So this webinar is taking place within the Diversity in STEM campaign. So we want to share some words on that with you first. And then we'll move to our two speakers. We have Rebecca from CA Technologies, as well as Annemiek from Shell. And I'll give them a proper introduction later on when it's their turn to speak. But don't worry, you'll also have a chance, of course, to get involved and participate. And to do that, we have arranged for some online polls so that you can vote and take part in the discussion. Of course, you will also have the opportunity to ask your questions freely to our presenters, and you can do that by writing in the chat. And my colleagues next to me here, who you can't see, but they're invisible but very important people, that's Jessica and Andrea, they will be very happy to help you. Okay, so let's have a look at the campaign. So we have launched this Diversity in STEM campaign 2 weeks ago now. And of course, it's a very important one because the focus really is in inviting and involving all primary and secondary school teachers, as well as career counsellors working in Europe, to help us raise awareness about the importance of diversity in STEM. So of course, by STEM, we mean science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Now, what is very important to underline is that diversity is an essential element of innovation in STEM, and without it, STEM studies and careers can't flourish to their maximum potential. So that's why it's really important that we come together and really raise awareness about the importance of this. We need to promote the inclusive representation of gender, economic and social backgrounds, both in the classroom and beyond, in order to really tackle those stereotypes that can be a real barrier to full engagement with STEM. So bringing diversity in STEM also means, of course, promoting collaboration between educators, ministries, industry, and non-profit organisations. And that's exactly why we are all here today. So to find out more about the campaign, you can just click on the link there on the slide. So we have created a little poster for you, which you can download from our website, and it shows you what's in the campaign that targets schools, companies, and all STEM stakeholders. So I'm going to go through a couple of those activities. The first is our Diversity in STEM competition. So the aim here really is to showcase best practices of diverse and inclusive representation of gender, economic and social backgrounds in the classroom. And here the target really is all teachers, whether at primary or secondary level, as well as career counsellors working in Europe. So you're very welcome to participate in the competition. It was launched 2 weeks ago at the start of our campaign, but it will run until mid-November. So you've got plenty of time to think about your submissions. There are 2 categories under which you can submit. The first is activities, and the second is career resources. So it means you can either create a career resource or you can actually create an event that promotes STEM. Okay, but all the details about those activities and the categories and the competition can be found at the link that you see just here on your slide. So we also have a few upcoming activities happening shortly within the campaign. We have 2 exciting videos of teachers in Malta as well as the Ukraine who are talking about their experiences of working with STEM Alliance, working with industry partners to really inspire young people to get involved in STEM studies and careers. So they will be launched in the next couple of weeks, so you should really look out for those on our website. We will also be publishing very shortly, in the next few days, a guide for companies on developing successful teacher placement schemes. Okay, so this is the initiative I mentioned a little earlier, whereby teachers have the opportunity to go into industry and get a real feel for what it means to be working in today's STEM world. Okay, and this of course is very important because it raises their motivation and their knowledge about what's happening in the STEM industry so that they can then go back to the classroom and pass on that enthusiasm and that knowledge to young students who then could be inspired to take up careers in the same areas. So you'll learn more about that once it's published. But of course, today, our campaign activity is the webinar itself. So we were really keen to get started with that, but we hope that was a useful introduction to the topic and to what we're doing. So I think before we pass over to our speakers, what we would like to do is to hear from you, our audience, to understand better what your experience of this important topic is. So to do that, we have a poll for you, and it asks the following question. Which is the biggest diversity issue you have faced in encouraging STEM studies and careers in your classroom? Okay, so that is the question, and we have a couple of choices in terms of answers. The first is getting female students interested in STEM studies and careers. Or perhaps it's getting students from lower socio-economic backgrounds interested, or perhaps it's getting less confident students, perhaps less academic or interested in STEM studies and careers. Of course, there may be other barriers you face when it comes to diversity, and if that's the case, you are very welcome to click on the other option, and then we'll be very happy to hear in the chat what those other barriers may be. So we'll give you a couple of moments to vote. I see already a lot of people have been voting. Okay, so once we get enough answers, we will share with you the results of this poll. But the idea is to get an understanding of the kind of issues you face when it comes to diversity in STEM studies and careers in your own classrooms within your own local contexts. Okay, so we have about 50 people who have voted now. So maybe we can wait one more moment to have a couple more, as we now actually have 81 participants in this webinar, so it'd be great to have a few more answers if possible. I think my colleague Andrea can help if you have any problems in voting, but it should be fairly straightforward. Okay, so we have quite a large response there. I think we can now publish the results. Yeah. So can you see the results on your screen? Yeah,
Mhm.
good. Okay. We obviously see something different to you, so good to get some nods from our presenters there. Great. So as you see, the most popular choice is the first option. So the issue that most teachers are facing are getting female students interested in STEM studies and careers. So of course that doesn't come as such a big surprise, but actually at the same level I see now, getting less confident students interested. So that's one we don't hear spoken about so much when we talk about the diversity problem. But of course, you may have students that are not so confident, even though they are academic and capable of doing great things within STEM, but they feel that it's not for them. And then that becomes a problem because they don't get involved and they don't pursue STEM studies, and therefore those careers are not open to them. So that's a really interesting one. We have about a third of responses saying that you have problems in engaging students from lower social economic backgrounds. And of course, that remains a very much real problem in Europe. And very few others saying other. So I think that goes to show really that those are the main issues that teachers are really facing. So that's a good I think, question to start with. Have a bit of an overview of what people are facing as issues. We hope to address those together with our speakers very shortly. So we will come back to that very soon. But first, I would like to pass over to our first speaker today, who is Rebecca Taylor-Cottle, who is Head of Communications and also a Diversity and Inclusion Lead for Northern Europe at CA Technologies. So, of course, her role is extremely relevant to today's topic. And so we are very pleased to hear from you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Caroline. Okay, so Caroline just introduced me. That's fantastic. It's really great to be speaking to you all today. This topic is very dear to my heart, so I hope that there'll be some useful information here for you. So Caroline and the team asked me to start by speaking a little bit about my career path and how I ended up working for a technology company. And CA Technologies are a software company. We are headquartered in New York, around about 11,000 people globally, and I work out of one of the UK offices. So I started going back to secondary school. My A-level choices were psychology, English literature and business studies, so not necessarily STEM topics. I was good at business studies, but I didn't enjoy the math side of things so much, and I was also good at English, and I wanted to do a degree that would lead me into a job, so something quite practical, rather than going and studying a very academic subject. So I went to Bournemouth University down on the south coast of England to study public relations, and that really combined that love of business and writing, with a little bit less emphasis on the budgeting side of things. Worked out really well for me, and one of the things that I feel was a really good choice was choosing a degree that had a year in industry. So in my third year of university, I did a placement with a public relations agency called Saltwater, who did boating PR actually, which wasn't necessarily the area I wanted to get into eventually, but it was a really great experience, and I worked there for a year and then went back to university to finish my final year. And I found it was very useful because I think if you've been doing an academic subject for a while, you can lose sight of what you're trying to achieve, and going into industry and then coming back and studying again meant that that last year of my university had a lot more context for me, and I understood how the degree would benefit me in the working world. When I graduated, I went to a food and drink PR agency, and then to a company called Octopus Group, who specialised in tech. From there, I went into marketing for a year, again for a technology marketing agency. So public relations and marketing are quite closely linked, different sorts of skills, but definitely a lot of transferable skills. And then just over 3 years ago, I was headhunted to come to CA Technologies. And my role at CA includes the media relations and public relations. So basically getting journalists to write nice things about CA Technologies, the social media, all the internal employee communications and executive communications, and I also run our corporate social responsibility program, Create Tomorrow, which I'll tell you a little bit more about later on in the presentation. So If you have any students you think might be interested in communications, these are the key skills as I see them. You've got to be very adaptable. Things change a lot, and I think this is true of a lot of jobs, but you might come in thinking you're going to focus on one thing and quickly find that you need to deal with something else. Sometimes a journalist will come to you with a request that needs to be fulfilled within an hour or two, and obviously if something goes badly wrong, you obviously have to be there to manage that crisis as well. Likewise, it's very useful to be able to multitask and work on short-term, mid-term and long-term projects simultaneously. And also, it's very important to be able to understand the business outcomes, especially if you're working agency side rather than in a company. You need to understand what your clients are looking for and how to best serve them. You obviously need to be great at communications in all channels, so written, spoken, things like social media. That sort of skill is very useful. And it's a very relationship-driven project. You have a lot of stakeholders across the business that you work for, across your customers, and with the journalists as well. And also, it is, as many jobs are these days, an incredibly fast-paced environment. So the ability to keep calm when you're under pressure is a real skill that's useful to have. So why does diversity matter in technology? At the very simplest terms, diverse organisations perform better than non-diverse organisations. So this is a great report from McKinsey, where they looked at the gender diversity, and they looked at the different quartiles of gender diversity. So the top quartile of businesses which had the most gender diversity are 21% more likely to outperform financially the bottom quartile in terms of gender diversity. And when you look at ethnic diversity and race, that goes up to 33%. So on a very basic level, companies that are more diverse just do better. And of course, alongside that, there is the very real fact that it is just the right thing to do. We need to be making these opportunities in STEM and technology available to everybody. There are many potential barriers for women in technology, and I really like this little image here. Obviously, everybody is different, and there may be elements of how people learn. Everyone's an individual, and that may apply to women, but it may apply to anybody. But then there's also family and peers. We've actually done several events at CA for young women who often say that the main challenge for them, the thing that puts them off getting into STEM, is actually their family. Because while they want the best for them, they don't necessarily understand STEM careers or how they might be appropriate, particularly for young women. Obviously, then there is perceptions at school and role models that they're exposed to, and just the kind of resources that you have that allow you to focus on students who might not automatically want to do STEM subjects. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. And then on top of that, there is society as a whole. The image of the sort of person who works in technology is not usually a woman. It's not usually an ethnic minority. And so there are some very big changes here in gender equality, policy, and the media that we ultimately need to change from the inside. So one of the things we've recently rolled out at CA Technologies that I thought you might be interested in is unconscious bias training. So we've delivered this so far to all of our, well, actually so far 40% of our European workforce. We are aiming to deliver it to all 2,000 people based in Europe. And we've also delivered it to a small cohort of teachers in a pilot that we ran a few months ago. And essentially, unconscious bias is about our brain using two systems. You have your conscious and your unconscious brain. And the conscious brain is the slow, deliberate part that you would use if you're making a difficult decision. But the unconscious bit is linked to your instinct, and you make those decisions much quicker without necessarily realizing that you're even making them. And those biases that everybody has come to you through your experience, how you've been brought up, the people you've met, the companies you've worked for. Everybody who has a brain has biases, and they come from many places. So those biases become hardwired into your brain. And so what we've been doing with the unconscious bias training is helping people to recognize what of their thought patterns are based on their biases and how they can potentially overcome those in the future. So what can we do? I thought this was a brilliant action plan. Obviously, I'm not a teacher myself, but this really spoke to me from a business point of view, and I thought that it might be helpful for everyone on the call. So there's a few things here that are specifically aimed at teachers. So watching your language, just being careful about not calling out boys and girls in certain ways in the classroom, and also challenging stereotypes from other people. You know, if you have a student that you hear say, oh, you can't do that because you're a girl, call them out on it, get them to explain why they think that. Mix up your materials. I think this is a particularly nice one, especially for people who are teaching at a younger level. Changing the gender of the characters in a storybook or something like that is always good. And make your expectations of behaviour universal. I certainly know, growing up with two brothers, that the expectations of how I would behave were not necessarily the same as how they would behave. And so where you can, try not to just be like, oh, boys will be boys, and make how you expect everyone to behave the same. Be careful of career and sports days. They can be a bit of a minefield in terms of gender. I'm not saying don't have them, I'm just saying think about it. And have things like gender neutral colours with no right and wrong, and also encourage mixed teamwork. Don't necessarily split out the boys from the girls to work on a project, get them all to work together. And at CA, we've been running a project for the last 3 years called Create Tomorrow, where we have been working directly with schools. And if I'm looking a little bit tired today, that is because I have spent the whole day running an event for 75 local schoolgirls, teaching them about STEM careers. We've been partnering with lots of other organisations. So we've been working today with some of our customers in big banks and retail and telco companies to deliver some projects for young women. It's all volunteer-led. All our employees have 5 days a year to volunteer, and they can choose to volunteer for Create Tomorrow. And so far, we've reached just over 23,000 students across Europe, with around about 20 to 30% of our European volunteer base taking part. So this has been a really exciting project. As I said, we're mainly targeting young people, but we have also started a pilot aimed at teachers, which has also been very interesting. And then finally, just want to talk to you about one final project that you may be interested in looking into. So part of the event this morning was a project called People Like Me, and CA is a founding sponsor of it. This project is aimed at girls aged 11 to 15, and there should be a digital resource launching next year. So if you Google People Like Me, you'll be able to find out about it. But from about January, you will actually be able to complete the questionnaire online. And what it is, it's a questionnaire that allows girls to self-identify with adjectives, so in the way they feel most comfortable. So they can say, I'm friendly, I'm organised, and it gives them different personality types which align to different jobs in STEM. So it's a fantastic thing for starting conversations and getting the girls to see that people like them really enjoy STEM jobs. At the moment, it is only available in English. I appreciate there's a lot of people on the line for whom that probably isn't the first language of your students. And we have a goal to reach 200,000 girls nationwide. But I think this is definitely one to watch in terms of future years. I would imagine that it will start to be translated and rolled out. And it is definitely something to look into. So that is everything from me. I've got my contact details here. I'm very happy to hear from everybody. And if anybody has any questions on the chat, then yeah, feel free to ask. Thanks, Caroline.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much, Rebecca. That was a really, really interesting start. I really appreciated that action plan you presented there with some really concrete tips on how to fight unconscious bias, which of course, as you mentioned, we all have. So that was really, really interesting. And I'm sure it struck a chord with a lot of our teachers here with us today. So we're now open for questions. So this is really your chance to ask Rebecca anything you would like concerning what she just presented. It might be about her personal career pathway. It might be more about what C8 Technologies is doing, some of the programs she mentioned there, Create Tomorrow or People Like Me. So please use the chat now to do that. I think we may have already one question. Is that right? Yes, we do. And who is this from? Okay, so we have a colleague working in a science centre. I'm not sure which country, but her question is about the Create Tomorrow programme. She would like to know some tips on how you can encourage students to take part. What do you say to them? So,
Okay, so one of the big things that we focus on is role models. So introducing young women to other women in technology and STEM, so that they can see that women can be successful in this space. And I know there are a lot, certainly in the UK, I can't speak so much for the rest of Europe, but I know there are a lot of businesses who are starting to get involved, go out to schools or host events. So that might be something worth looking at, whether you can connect with a local business perhaps, to have some people come into the school and talk to them. We also try and keep it quite hands-on. So this morning, the two things we did were the People Like Me training, and we also did agile methodologies. Agile is a way of designing software, essentially, where you work in short sprints to make sure that the software is made to the correct specification. And we had the girls this morning working in short sprints to build a hotel resort out of Lego. So they were learning the principles of Agile, but they were doing it in a very hands-on way, not necessarily on a computer or anything like that. So I think those nice practical tasks can really help and start to open their eyes up. Hope that helps.
okay, great. Thank you very much for that informative answer there. We have another question from a European SchoolNet colleague who was wondering about getting access to this unconscious bias training. You mentioned you did a pilot there with some teachers. Is this something you're going to extend in the future?
We are hoping to, yes, and we operate in, I think we ran one just today, I think it was, in fact, in Prague. So that's only our second one. We are hoping that we'll have the opportunity to roll that out. I think in terms of unconscious bias training, though, it is getting more and more airtime. It's becoming more and more on people's radars. So I suspect, again, that it is something that more people will be offering. I understand there's probably a resourcing situation for a lot of schools, but it's probably something I'm sure there would be a supplier in most countries who would be able to offer something like that.
Okay, great, good, very good. In fact, now we have a poll question, which is exactly about your experiences of bias training. So I know we had a question there about accessing the CA Technologies training, but we're interested in knowing about other teachers and whether you have actually been involved in any kind of unconscious bias training. So we have the wrong poll up. Could you get rid of that? So apologies, we've got the wrong poll there. So we're going to close that poll and now post one about the unconscious bias training, because it leads on very nicely from what Rebecca's just been presenting and the questions we were getting from the audience. So here we go. It's a very simple binary question. Have you ever taken unconscious bias training as a teacher, or you may be a career counsellor or someone else working within a school, but we would love to hear from you on that. So if you could take just a moment to answer a very quick question. Oh, wonderful. We've got lots of responses already. So, of course, it doesn't have to be one run by a company. This is any kind of unconscious bias training you may have been involved in, whether through your own professional development related to your ministry, your school, or unrelated. So we have a little bit less people answering this question, but we're going to publish the results for that now. So you should be able to see the results now. And as you see, the majority of people who answered say that they have not yet been engaged in any kind of unconscious bias training, but they would like to. So that's really positive. There is an interest in this from a teacher perspective, and I think it's clear why, because this can really have an impact on how we teach and inspire STEM to our young people, who of course are going to be the STEM professionals of the future. So that is important. We have about 9 participants saying that they have engaged in such training. So that's interesting. And about another 10 saying they haven't at all yet. So that is one to watch out for. And we will be keeping in touch with CEST Technologies, who I hope will be able to expand their offer on that. So watch this space if you're interested in getting involved. Great. So we have actually one more poll for you. We'd like to share before we move to a short video that has been kindly provided to us by Annemiek from Shell. And then she will have, of course, the opportunity to present as well. So our next poll is more from the industry. It's this one. Yes, so we have the right poll now. It's indeed to find out about your experiences of industry activities. So we'd like to know if you or your students have access to STEM activities organised by commercial companies such as Shell and CEA in your area. So we see people are already voting on that, so you're getting used to these polls, which is fantastic. So you've heard about the CA Technologies initiatives. You're about to hear about the Shell initiatives. So you want to know if you've had the opportunity to already engage in industry initiatives, either these ones or others. Okay, shall we close that poll? Okay, so the majority of you, we have 63% there who are saying that they have not engaged in industry activities in this area, but of course would like to engage in them. So there is a big market there for you industry people to really reach out to teachers who I think have an interest in this kind of activity, but have not always got perhaps access to the right information at the right time. So that is something definitely to be developed in the future. And indeed, STEM Alliance is very much involved in helping industry talk to schools about that. So that's something we are very much focused on. We do have a proportion of people saying they have engaged in such activities, so almost 30%. So that's encouraging. And of course, we are always keen to hear about your experiences. So please do get in touch with European Schoolnet through our social media, through our emails to both Scientix or the STEM Alliance projects. We will always love to hear from your experiences in actually cooperating with industry and what you learn and benefit from that. Okay, so I think we can now move on to a video just before we move on to Annemiek, our second speaker. She has provided us with a very nice short video from Shell, which really I think puts the diversity challenge in focus. So we're going to just set that up for you, and you should be able to see it on your screen very shortly.
Those clothes don't make you look good. Are you putting on weight or something? She only got the position because she's a woman. You don't want to be an engineer. That's a man's job. These are real things women engineers have actually heard.
Why doesn't your husband just let you stay home? Hey, sweetie, when you got him, and I'll get a cup of coffee.
Look who's wearing earrings today. You got promoted too?
So we've only got one ladies' bathroom. It's up 3 flights of stairs.
Nice breath, Sarah. Good to see you making an effort.
File that for me. That's good girl.
Oh, great. I'm so glad there's another
We
woman
won't
here.
tiptoe around you because you're a woman, you know. You still have to put in the same amount of work.
Okay, so I think you will all agree that that was quite a thought-provoking short video there, which may well resonate with people here on our webinar today, and indeed with some of the things that your students may have also heard, or fellow colleagues. So I think it's a great way to start with our second speaker, who is Annemiek Mensert, who is reservoir engineer at Shell International, and we will now look forward to hearing from her. Thank you so much, Annemiek.
Okay, cool. Yes, well, I can do whatever you can do.
Yes, very well, yeah.
It resonates, I think, with a lot of people around here. My name is Annemiek Mensert. I'm 46 years old. I'm married and I have a 7-year-old girl here in the picture who has been introduced to some STEM activities already, I must admit. Yeah, so this is me. I was born and raised in Delft, and during my time at high school, I decided that although I wasn't exactly the best in STEM in STEM subjects, I still wanted to do technical studies. So I decided to go to the TU Delft, conveniently in my place of living. And I went to do applied earth sciences and a master in petroleum engineering. I hesitate a bit because it seems to that I have lost connection with my camera. But I'll just continue and maybe we'll get that back in a bit. When I graduated, I went on to become an IT specialist in oil and gas software at Logica PLC. And after a few years, I had the opportunity to go and become a reservoir engineering assistant and work in a virtual reality room in Shell Expro in Aberdeen. Now, I never figured I would end up in Shell because at the time they were looking for a lot of different people and only the best for the best, which I felt I didn't really apply to. But when I joined Shell, I found it so very welcome, and we had such a good time that I did apply for a job at Shell, and I was accepted. I went on to do lecturing for simulation, reservoir simulation, and I currently work as a reservoir engineer at the Shell Project and Technology. A reservoir engineer is does a reservoir simulation, and what you basically do is given a pressure, a temperature, and composition of a subsurface reservoir filled with oil, water, and gas. You make a physical description of what your reservoir does based on known equations. And you try to simulate that over time to get the amount of oil, the maximum amount of oil out. I work with a very diverse team, men, women. There's about 92,000 people in Shell, and I think there's over 70 different nationalities. We all come from a different place and work in a different place. And there's a lot of different type of people, and I love working there. So how did that come about? Although it's some time ago, I think I would like to show you this picture of me and my granddad, because it illustrates very nicely what young girls and young people go through if they have to make their choice. What kind of information do we have? Where do we get the information from that makes us do the decisions? External influence such as classmates, teachers, parents, and family. They all have a big influence on young people. And what makes you actually decide a certain career choice? Is it you, or is it the environment that filters the information that you get to? As an example here in the corner, my math teacher told me that my grades were too low to go to technical university, whereas the boy next to me with exactly the same grades got his blessing to go to university. Now my physics teacher said, well, you may not have the best grades, but you have an interest in science and you have a good way of working, so you get by. So why just not try it? And that's what I did. Although my school friends didn't do STEM, and my family was quite open for it, but didn't know what to expect either. So I just did. I just went and I did it, and actually, it was a lot of fun. In this picture, this is just me about 25 years ago as a student at the training facility for Shell. And there's a number of girls here which might have trouble recognize us in between all the other men in overalls. This was just to show that I had a lot of fun at the university and it was the right choice for me. And although in the beginning I was quite uncertain, I ended up as a very good engineer. And being a girl, I always saw was an advantage because you stand out and there's not a lot of people like you. So you're out of the ordinary, and that can work out very positively. So if we talk about what you learn in university, it's more than just facts. It's a way of thinking. It's a system thinking. It's problem solving. It's critical thinking. And these are things that we all need in order to get future problems solved. And there are a number of global challenges like energy transition, which of course Shell is working with, global warming, change from oil and gas to sustainable energy sources, and we need people to do that. And Shell also has realized that the pipeline of STEM persons has run dry rather a bit, and we as Shell have a global approach of enthusiasting and empowering young people. And having them given tools and skills to make, not only to go into STEM, but also to make the right choice to go into future education possibilities. And I really like that statement where they, what they say here, it's not what you want to be when you grow up, because who knows who wants to be when you're 14. It's what kind of problem do you want to solve and how do you want to solve it? And we can help you get the information and get the skills and the tools to help you solve that. There's a number of Dutch initiatives which I would like to show you. As we just saw in the poll, there's a lot of interest in having companies interact with schools in order to find the right role models. In the Netherlands, there's just two major examples which Shell is involved in. On the one hand, there's JetNet. JetNet is a cross-company initiative which contains international and national companies together. And what they do is they get schools together with company and with people working in STEM. And they form alliances to, for example, give math lessons, but also have visits from schools to, for example, Shell, but also companies like Philips, DSM, Tata Steel are here in this group together. And I've given many lessons to kids coming over to school, from school to our company. And every time I do that, I am amazed what the girls and boys notice, and what they don't know about what it is like to work in a major oil company. So that really opens up the role model, and it opens up the information that they give. The other one, Dutch initiative I want to mention is Generation Discover. In 2 weeks' time, for the third time, Generation Discover Festival in The Hague will open. It's organized by Shell, and it's all about the energy transition. It's a multi-day festival. It's a week-long festival where kids can learn about STEM, energy transition, and ways of solving the problems of the future. There's exhibitions on new energy, racetrack to race your own salt water-driven car. You can experiment with science, and there's lots and lots of craft sessions as well. And there's volunteers from Shell to help you do that. This does serve a double purpose for Shell to get the message out what they want people to know about the energy transition and their role, and also kids and girls to come in contact in a different way with STEM and with technology. Internationally, we also have a program. It's called Annex Explorer, and it's more about what I just said, what you learn at university. So the habits of mind, the system thinking, the problem solving, the ways of thinking that you learn at the technical university, STEM habits of mind. And we want to open up possibilities for girls and boys between the age of 9 and 15 to get into STEM, into STEM skills, and to show them a different form of what they can do when they grow up. This is my concluding slide. And this is just my own thoughts, what I wanted to share with you. Where to start? We have heard about from Rebecca and Caroline about unconscious bias. We all have it. Have a look at where your unconscious bias lies and what we tell our students. Look for role models close by. It could be a mom that is working as an engineer, or a dad that is doing something similar. Come into class and tell them about it. But also famous people. There are actresses from the Big Bang Theory, for example. That's neuroscience, as well as an actress. Frau Merkel in Germany. She's been a research scientist for many, many years, and now is a famous politician. That way, also showing role models from far away can open the discussion in your class, and it opens the mind. It might open the mind of some people and show them different information from what they previously got and thought. The outside school initiative and outside comfort zone might not yet be available to everybody yet. However, a lot of companies these days have promotions for STEM careers, and in a lot of companies, in a lot of countries, they are already available. If not, why not take initiative yourself and go ask a company, can my class come and visit you? Can my class come and see what you do? It doesn't need to be an international oil company, but also smaller companies can have a very valuable insight into what boys and girls can become. And with that, STEM skills, make sure that they are that you are positive about them, that they are, and I'm sure you already do that because you're a teacher. So that is about my presentation. If you have any questions, or if you'd like to know more about the NX Explorers, for example, it's been rolled out in quite a number of countries this year, and it's going to be rolled out in furthermore countries. So if you're interested, go to the website, and you can always contact me or somebody at Shell in your own country to see if there are possibilities. So that was my presentation. I'm very sorry that at the moment supreme my camera froze.
No problem.
I've started to try to start it up again, but it is just gone out. So
Okay, no problem at all. Thank you so much, Annemiek. That was really, really great to hear your personal experience and also the challenges you faced. You know, being very honest about the fact that you didn't actually manage to get top grades necessarily. You also had a challenge in being a female interested in pursuing a STEM career. And despite those challenges, despite those odds, you are today a successful engineer for a massive, successful company as Shell. And not only, but you're here sharing your experience with many interested people who I think will have a lot to learn from you. So thank you very much for that. That was really, really precious. Good. So we do indeed have a question for you from a guide and presenter at a science centre in Malta. And it's a very interesting question. She asks that when she was working, her boss, her male boss, actually said that he was very pleased he had recently hired female engineers because he felt they brought a different set of perceptions, which actually improved results in the work environment. And she wondered whether you have also found this to be true. So does the female perspective add something to the working environment? And do you think this is a good hook to encourage girls to enter the STEM field?
Yes, sorry to interrupt you there, Caroline. It indeed changes a diverse, not only female and male, but also many different nationalities change a meeting room, change a project team. On one hand, there's different opinions about how to tackle issues, but also I often find that female engineers take a different viewpoint on certain topics, but also the way a meeting works is influenced. And yes, so I think it's actually been researched that it has a positive effect on results. And Rebecca just also mentioned that in the earlier presentation. Yeah, so that's very true. And I must admit, if I worked once in an all-female team, and I really liked the diversity of a male and female team together, because only females together, that has its own problems.
Very good point. Yes, thank you for bringing that up. Indeed, it's not. It's of course valid for any same-sex group. I think the idea, of course, is to encourage diversity. So indeed, mixed groups, as you say, really have a lot to bring to the table. So that's wonderful. Thank you for that. Really thank you to all our participants for all the various questions you have been chatting about in the chat, to our two wonderful presenters for their clear, succinct and very inspiring presentations. And we would like to finish up with the last poll that we're going to put on the screen just now for you before wrapping up. And this one I think is really important because it gets to the core of the issue for teachers who really want to know about concrete methods and ways of including a diversity approach to STEM. So the question here is, we'd like to hear about your experiences. What has worked best when trying to increase an inclusive approach to STEM studies and careers in your classroom? So this is really to understand in your own experience what you find has worked. So we've got a lot of people answering here. It's our final poll, so it'd be great to get as many participants as possible to answer that question. It will also really help us in terms of our work here at European SchoolNet, but of course our industry representatives as well. So do get voting. Great, we're seeing lots of answers coming in. Okay, fantastic. I think we can close the poll now. Brilliant. So you should see the results on your screens now. And as you see, the top result there really is inviting diverse STEM role models into the classroom. Okay, so that's encouraging to see because, as you know, and as we mentioned earlier, STEM Alliance does run a program in which we do invite industry representatives to come directly in the classrooms and to present how they work, their career paths, how to inspire young people into these studies and professions. So that's great to see that that is working for teachers and students across Europe, according to the teachers with us today. But the other things are also highly voted. In second position there, we've got about 50% of participants saying that using specific teaching methods aimed at inclusion also work very well. Okay, so this might be, for example, unconscious bias, as we heard about earlier. It might be other types of teaching methods that can really help to ensure an inclusive approach. Interestingly, we also see that revising the content of the curriculum is something teachers have experience of doing and do find that does help to better suit students' interests. Okay, so the content is also important, as is engaging with other types of school industry collaboration, which we see there, as well as universities and research communities. So I would say there's quite a lot of a wide spread of answers there. So all of these are important ways of tackling the diversity issue. So there are ones to, of course, keep promoting and keep investing and engaging in. Great. So to wrap up now, I would just like to draw your attention to the fact that this webinar is officially about to end, but believe it or not, right now, just across the hall from where I am sitting this moment, another webinar has just kicked off, and it is with our colleagues from Scientix, and they are looking at how to get astronomy research more accessible in the classroom. And this is part of the World Space Week initiative. So Scientix is taking part in that. And if you click on that link just there on the screen, you can access that webinar now. So they're just getting started, as I mentioned, next door. So if you have time, please do log in to check out what they're talking about there. Another Scientix event happening next week is on the 10th of October, and this will be a Facebook Live event in collaboration with Euronews. So this should have quite a high profile, and the interesting thing about this is you will be able to ask your questions live to the expert Tiago Sols, who is from the European Space Agency. So don't miss that opportunity. I think it will be an interesting one. And before closing today's webinar, we'd just like to remind you, of course, of our own STEM Alliance activities. So within the diversity campaign we'll be speaking about today, of course, we have the competition for teachers, whether primary or secondary. So don't forget to submit your entries. The link is just there. And of course, coming up in November, we have another webinar, and this time it will be devoted to chemistry careers in the petrochemical industry. And that, of course, is with our valued member, EPCA. So do register for that. And I think that is all from us. Just a very big thank you once again to our two speakers. Do remember that all the slides from today's webinar, as well as the webinar recording, will be made available on the STEM Alliance website, and it will also be sent to each of our participants by email, so you will have access to all of that. So take care, have a very good evening, and we hope to see you on one of our webinars again soon. Goodbye.